Welcome to Independently Speaking, the new podcast of the Independent Schools Association. Celebrating our diversity, we take pride in representing a broad spectrum of educational settings, including nursery, preparatory, senior, sixth form, and boarding schools. This vibrant network includes institutions specializing in the arts, sports, and faith-based education, along with those offering exceptional assistance for students with special educational needs or disabilities. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Independently Speaking. Now here is your host, ISA Director of Education and Inclusion, Helen Stanton-Tonner.
Welcome to the ISA podcast, Independently Speaking. I am your host, Helen Stanton-Tonner, the Director of Education and Inclusion for ISA. And today we're continuing the conversation around AI and technology in schools. In this episode, we're going to be exploring the critical crossroads of hybrid learning, separating transformative innovation from cost-driven digital models that risk undermining educational quality. Joining me today for this conversation is Melissa McBride, the founder and proprietor of Sophia High School, a leading UK-based online school pioneering daily live instruction, small class sizes, and project-based learning. We're going to be unpacking the possible future of education by delving deeper into her thought-provoking article, which she entitled, "The Future of Education is Hybrid, but Beware the Wolf in Digital Clothing." Melissa, welcome to our podcast. It's really great to have you with us today.
A pleasure and an honor, actually, to be here and to be shaping part of the conversation about this hugely important kind of new era, I think, for education on the horizon.
And you obviously, we're talking a little bit about your article, "The Future of Education is Hybrid, but Beware the Wolf in Digital Clothing," that you recently composed. What inspired you to write that?
I think, since I took a leap of faith from being an independent school head teacher, so bricks and mortar traditional infrastructure, into the world of online back in 2020, one of the things that we have learned on this journey is, online education has been around for quite a long time. There are many, many different approaches to online education. And I think many of those approaches are deeply rooted in what young people need. But when we think about what I truly believe is going to be, a core driver of the future, when we talk about how traditional schools, independent and international schools make the shift to embracing a hybrid workforce and a hybrid model of delivery, it's really, really important that we reflect on how to maintain a quality first mandate, that is so essential to all the schools that we work with here within the ISA. And I'm just deeply aware of trends and that we can have a huge wave of new solutions that emerge or slight twists and variations of previous solutions. And for me, it's about embracing what's coming, working with our partners, but also being deeply aware of what some of the risks are in terms of that decision-making process, so that schools, if they are choosing to move hybrid, that we don't compromise on the quality that we would expect in our physical schools.
So Melissa, obviously with hybrid education in whatever form it takes, some things are misunderstood about it. People hear different sort of stories or different ways it might work. So what do you think, in your view, is the most misunderstood aspect of hybrid education?
I think when we think about hybrid, the first thought from parents, potentially students, but certainly staff, was the challenges that were faced during COVID, because we had a rapid period of transformation literally forced overnight. And so when things moved online and then when it transitioned back to being in person, but still some remote support for those that might have been shielding, for example, we still didn't have models that were put in place with pedagogy designed for a remote first learning experience. So I think some of that trauma, and I certainly had my own, as I'm a mom of four, so my two eldest were COVID children. That is, I think, the first amount of fear that's misunderstood. The second big area, which is engagement, and again, I think it loops back from, again, COVID pulling through, but experiences of young people in the classroom where there can be a lot of digital fatigue. There's a lot of concern with parents as a key stakeholder in this conversation around screen time. But with the right use of tools, and we might explore that a little bit later, actually you can accelerate engagement of young people and improve, teaching and learning pedagogy because it becomes ultra personalized at scale. But the last thing then is, certainly we work with a lot of school leaders, is how do we convince parents who are fee paying that this is a value add experience and not a cost cutting exercise? And I think those really are the three big areas that we work with when we are connecting with our school partners and helping them to shape their own model of hybrid education. So it's unpacking those three central areas, I think, in the story and its development.
And with some of those concerns, obviously, with all technological development, there are thoughts about equity gaps and these getting wider. Now, it's obvious with the hybrid learning, it could both bridge but also widen those sorts of gaps. Do you think there's any safeguards that are essential to make sure that any hybrid schooling serves all its learners and not just those that are most resourced?
I mean, I think at the most basic level, what we're talking about is equipping a workforce and equipping children with a device that will allow them to connect from wherever they may be. So, that is as much as schools, if a hybrid mandate is actually their children still on their physical campus, which is a model that we work with, making sure that the schools have the right broadband and the right access. But when that then filters outside of the school boundaries, and, actually at Sophia High School, we have a number of children who are commissioned to us from local authority partners who don't have that access at home. So, it does start with a premise of what is the non-negotiable that's needed. So how do we ensure that children have the right devices to connect, which will enable them to engage and to work within what we empower, which is facilitation of learning and not absorbing content. But then also looking at the different boundaries and levels of what's required, right? And then the fundamental piece is, once you have that piece of equipment, is how do you ensure that those that are using the delivery model have access to, that Wi-Fi connection, that broadband connection at home. And those are two actually critical points that we explore, both from a point of view, as I said, of our own children at the school, and how do we support that, and the local authorities who may be commissioning alongside fee-paying parents, but equally, even within some of our independent school partners here in the UK, it's working with them in terms of making sure that those cost variables are addressed and that it can be a one student, one device model of delivery, which is really, really important, again, when we come back to that engagement piece, that everybody has a piece of kit that they're able to access the learning environment, without delay, disruption, to put them at a disadvantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And within your article, you drew from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, which, for our listeners who don't know, is an international organisation that works to build better policies, sort of for better lives. That's kind of their slogan. And the OECD stresses that no factor is more critical than teaching quality. So what do you think are the most dangerous trends that you might see in a scaled up digital learning environment today?
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic because, the organization and the paper that they produced was rooted in best practice in terms of what is happening with the global range of schools that they provide. And most of those, as a matter of fact, are looking at physical bricks and mortar infrastructure. But when we take best practice in quality delivery of curriculum, teaching and learning practice, we need to pull those things through. I think when I look at what potentially is available, or what some schools may be considering, is high quality teaching in a digital environment is not tuition. There are an awful lot of tuition providers and supply teaching providers that are moving in this way. But we would all argue that within our school environments, there's a huge process of quality assurance that goes on in the background. Everything from, safer recruitment and safeguarding to the training of your workforce, to looking at that breadth of curriculum, the delivery, and actually the learning outcomes of the young people. And those things are so fundamental. The report actually focuses heavily also on contact time. In schools, one of the greatest, I think, attributes of an independent education is that schools are able to have smaller class sizes than we might see with some of our state school counterparts. And that time that young people get to spend with teachers, learning as close to one as possible, is really, really fundamental in that story. And I think I do get really nervous when I see clear decisions that have been made with a business and a bottom line in mind that's wrapped up in, well, actually, we can do more with less contact with teachers, because I think it's actually the opposite that the report is showing. What we should be using the digital environment for is to increase the amount of time that we have to work with young people one-on-one, because the research would show that that is where great learning outcomes happen. And I think that is something from a quality assurance piece, in terms of whichever hybrid model you choose as a school and whichever hybrid partner you work with, they should plug it straight into what you already have running, and your annual cycle of review, your policies, your processes, and not be seen as just a bolt-on. And then the second is increasing the amount of time that you can spend in smaller groups and on a one-to-one basis at scale, because we're using digital tools and technology, not reducing it. And I think those two things are really quite fundamental to how I see schools looking at their hybrid roadmap.
It's interesting that you mentioned their smaller class sizes and almost one-to-one learning, if possible, because alongside the thought of the digital learning and hybrid learning have been terminology like self-guided learning or increasing classes to 100 plus that sometimes has been mentioned. But do these conflict with what quality teaching would look like in your view?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Again, we come back to, there are decisions that can be made which are student focused and quality outcomes focused, or there are decisions that can always be made in terms of, chasing scale and revenue and business focused mandates. For me, and if we look at Sophia High School, putting it quite simply, the number one thing that we pay for is our teaching staff. And the number one thing that we do for our teaching staff, who, by the way, are all on, main pay scale for England, we follow the school teachers pay guidance. So, we value them as experts in the field, regardless of whether they've come out of a traditional sector or joining our online school. So it is about the right workforce. It is about then how you use the time in the workforce. So teachers are, in an online space, the number one resource that you pay for. That allows you so much scope, therefore, to start to look at things like class sizes. So in our classes in the core subjects, so English, Maths, and Science, which we know, young people often need more one-to-one time. We're able to work metrics in terms of teachers having groups of 6. And then those learner pathways not necessarily having to follow a curriculum age band, but actually a stage and age of the learner. So we do have young people who are year 5, through the magic of digital, they're working at a year 8 level and can form within those subject areas, the right learning pod. So it's right place, right time, right support, right pathway. And the reverse can also be the same. We have some young people who, for various reasons, have not quite yet sat their GCSEs. So they might be year 12, but need to go back. And in the online space, you don't have that. But in those core subjects, being able to have, 6 in a group still gives enough space for independent-led opportunities within the regular class and obviously outside of it. Oftentimes that can be driven through tools that we use, like breakout rooms. We have, every student has their own basically digital notebook that is worked on in real time. But also then with 6, you're not having as much, well, let's face it, one-to-one time can be stressful for young people because they have nowhere to bounce their ideas off of. They have nowhere to go. So 6 for us is actually a really great number. And then in other subjects, we do a lot of project-based learning, where we look at languages, where we look at sometimes the humanities. Obviously, the nature of those classes is much more debate and discourse. And of course, we can move those groups together. But, class sizes is really, really fundamental in terms of an approach. So I do get very nervous when I see, organizations championing, well, actually, you can have 40% less teaching time. And I think actually we really need to be looking at it the other way around, from the bottom up, is that young people will benefit from more direct teaching time, which is focused. Yes, we can get rid of some of the other, I don't want to call them time wasters, but in a physical school, right? The moving from one place to another, from one building to another, the ferrying around. So we can accelerate and compress the learning day, but actually we can give much more focus to those learners in a highly personalized scenario. And so one piece of feedback that we have when we do our tours, and this week we had some ISA deputy heads who were at your conference recently coming, is the level of engagement for them was the thing that stood out. The way that our teachers knew inside and outside those young people, and actually could read the mood and read the room in those scenarios because of the small class sizes. So I think these are things that digital technologies can really, really help with. And I think also as a personal reflection, it's probably why when we had this massive shift back in 2019 to COVID learning, we had to move huge group sizes online, and weren't able to really reach young people at their level in every lesson, that we were running. And so we learned from those in terms of how we designed Sophia and put it together.
And you mentioned sort of like students obviously being being put on a pathway that's suitable for them. So could you briefly describe what a typical day for a student at Sophia High would actually look like?
I have 4 children, and I'll just preempt this with a little story. So I have 4 children. They don't always all go to Sophia High. A couple of them have at different points of their educational journey, because I'm very passionate about right time, right place, right support, and right pathway. And I think that's something that all schools should be thinking about. It's not suitable hybrid for everybody all at one time. But one of my middle children, who was actually the greatest use case for me, he used to say to me, school is 7 crappy hours of our lives. And I thought, why is this? And I think when we unpacked it, is not because he hated school, it wasn't like that, but he always didn't feel like it was designed for him. So when we say about these kind of individual pathways, it's recognizing where that learner is at that point in time. Some young people, their barrier to learning may be how they feel about themselves as a learner, or how they engage with their peers. So being able to unpack that. And other people's journey is more about, are they stretched too much, or are they not challenged enough? So being able to manipulate the English National Curriculum learning groups based on, if we did away with 1st of September and 31st of August, like where would they fall on that learning journey, and being able to plug those gaps. And also in an online environment, which I think is a real benefit, is you can move those groups almost seamlessly when that young person has shown that they are ready or in need. Traditional schools are very difficult because you have caps on how many young people can physically sit in this class at that desk on that chair. And in the digital space, you can be much more responsive to the needs of young people. When we look then higher up the school, and we're talking about the kind of GCSE and A-level years, one of the things that we've done is we've followed very much the mindset of, the BDLs and the Latimers of the world, and saying, well, actually, if we allow for the core curriculum subjects to come through, so we do English, maths, double or triple science, we have global citizenships, and then some options, what does that free up in the day to explore? So at Sophia High, Monday to Thursday is when we run all of the kind of core curriculum, all of the subjects from Key Stage 1 to GCSE and A-level. The young people in the UK would have lessons scheduled between 8 a.m. as our start time, because we do away with any travel to school, of course, and their last lesson would finish at about 1:05. Now, little is often more in an online space, especially when it's accelerated. So the lesson times will vary between sometimes 30 minutes in reception at this point of the year, less when they first started, up to about 50 minutes with our GCSE and A-level students. And then there are digital wellness breaks throughout the day. So we often have a shorter, in theory, school day, but it's enriched and it's filled. We have form time, and Fridays is so incredible because we've moved to core Monday to Thursday. What the students are doing today across the school, and oftentimes in vertically grouped, is exploring passions, interests, and opportunities. So Friday for us becomes a day when, the young people are doing an enrichment program. So from everything from, forensic science to coding to esports to looking at historical figures of importance, house activities. So we've really been able to embrace that and in terms of opening up what is possible for young people. But for our staffing side, which we shouldn't be forgotten, in doing that, our staff team have their school meetings in the beginning or at the beginning of a day on Friday. They have time on Fridays if they're core curriculum teachers, to then look at assessed learning. And at the same time, our young people, if they have questions on consolidation, they can reach out and contact teachers. So, again, it's a full day, it's a busy day. We still do, a full broad balanced curriculum, but we've navigated how do we accelerate time in the learning spaces in order to, frankly, make more time for our young people outside of the live lessons to do the things they're most passionate about. And we find that that's actually been one of the key features for our families, is saying, they're still seeing incredible rates of progress in their young people, incredible rates of engagement, but actually we've often given children back their lives as children and as members of a family, because a lot of the learning and independent led work is happening between the hours of 8 and 4 rather than 8 and 4 and then outside of it.
So obviously you talked there about sort of student experience and how it's benefited their family life, and that's wonderful to hear. But how do you build that sort of sense of community and support with the student social and emotional development in your virtual environment?
I think we used to, a number one question that doesn't come up as often anymore, but was certainly on the agenda was, how do kids socialize? Like how do we create those senses of connections that they might get in the physical school? So I think when we explain to parents, we say your young person is going to have the magical power of the and. They're going to have a digital community that we will cultivate, and we will create the right ecosystem and environment from which that they can build relationships, not just with people in their geographic region, as you might see in a traditional school, but actually globally. And our young people, at the moment we span from Sao Paulo and a number of Caribbean islands all the way through to the UK, throughout Europe, UAE, Saudi, Kazakhstan, and even Afghanistan. So we truly have a global community of learners, which is beautiful. And I have had the pleasure of being an international head in many, heavily expat regions, but I've never felt the true sense of, a global learning community as we do here online, where we share and we learn about cultures, communities, landscapes, geography, and it can change overnight. The kids travel around the globe in 24 hours, and they've never even left where they started from in many cases. So, there's definitely a digital community, and I'll unpack that a bit, but it's also to say is when you're given back time, how can you facilitate connections within your physical communities? What other things can you be getting your young people involved in, whether that's, local charity work, or having more time to play with their friends, or connections with families, or to explore passions, interests, whether that's forest school or it's their local club. Again, finding that balance. And we speak to parents a lot about that. But then within the Sophia High ecosystem, I think there's a lot of young people who are choosing, and this is also independent school parents who are choosing online because something is not working in a traditional sector. And when we have something that's not worked, there often is challenges potentially with SEMH, challenges with anxiety that young people face. And their families face. So, bringing them in and building those trusted relationships with the key people first, that those families, from the first touch point, with my admin team or the admissions team, all the way through to some of the teachers that we work with young people, perhaps on a one-to-one basis, just to build familiarity, to build confidence, to introduce the school. And some young people just come and they step right in and they're full throttle. And others, we need to almost unpack it again, starting from what is it that this young person needs to feel like they're wanting to come and turn on their computer every day and press join on that button and feel like they have a role to play, hearing their voice and bringing that through. We do a lot, as I said, around, building the same type of form groups and same type of social cultures, allowing it to be vertically grouped at times. The kids at Sophia High have houses. At the moment they're working on, every house has chosen a charity that the school children have decided is really important to what is the shared belief within that house. And they're all in their own unique geographical regions doing charity initiatives. So today, I've seen plans of beach walks. I've seen plans of girls who join us from Afghanistan looking at how they can do bake sales. I've seen, everything from readathons to car washes. But again, no matter where you are, everybody has a connected space and place at the school. Our esports team is amazing. Doing sports we do, but how can you create, basketball? Well, I can tell you, get them kitted out on Rocket League, and you build the same types of collaboration, teamwork, resilience. Like, how do you deal with stress? How do you work with each other? And so looking at different lenses to really bring these same kind of skills and attributes and community building blocks, tools in, and the greatest thing that I love to hear is often after a break is when families say, you wouldn't believe it, but so-and-so child met up with so-and-so child because we were traveling, and to feel that sense of a coming together. But for some of our learners, as I say, I'll give the mention to the incredible girls in Afghanistan. One of the ways that they build their community is through a lot of the projects that we do. So they get to work with young people of the same age on mandates and business ideas and entrepreneurial pursuits that really matter to all of them. So they are using the digital pathways to build connections which make sense to them. And it's also then opened up everybody's eyes, not just theirs, but ours, to this incredible global community and the power and reach that we have when you can embrace digital in a quality first mandate to actually bring learning to life and make connections, around the world every single day. So it's quite special. But as I said, I will go back to, it isn't one and it isn't the other. It's actually the power of uplifting both sides of our social networks and communities in the digital space, but equally back in the traditional space.
And that's so important, isn't it? That there's a balance between those two. And from what you're describing, it's really interesting to hear how, there has been a bit of a shift from obviously a physical building holding the community of the school, but the community, the sense of community has expanded beyond that, hasn't it, within each of students' own environment. And do you think that there will be long-term cultural or societal shifts if schooling continues to move this way?
I think where we have a huge opportunity, we've entered the intellectual age, right? We've moved from the knowledge age to the intellectual age. I think where we have an incredible opportunity is to look at behaviors for a positive human experience. And the human experience will be innately physical and it will be innately digital. But actually we need to be able to navigate those arenas in a safe, ethical, and effective manner, where we keep humans, at the center point of the reason why, right? And again, we know that there are challenges and opportunities and things we haven't even imagined. So it's gifting our young people with, the skills and the confidence that they need to be the problem solvers of the future. So, in moving in this way, I think there's a huge opportunity to drive those real fundamentals, which move beyond just, frankly, what should just be the non-negotiable, which is a quality educational experience, and take it to an entirely new level, which, not only meets certainly young people, in a diverse range from those that are neurodiverse to those that are high-performing young people, either because of athletics or other passions of interest, to family dynamics, being more on the move, not being in one place all the time, but wanting flexibility to travel, to explore, and then obviously then coming back to our staff workforce, how do you utilize hybrid to have a subject specialist expert in every single subject at every different level within your school and be able to work in many cases on the terms of that subject expert. And I think that is something that we love, and we love exploring with our school partners in terms of the immense potential when you are prepared to do a little bit of blue sky thinking, and lean in to what you might perceive as a risk, but actually is a huge benefit when done correctly.
And that's really a benefit that, a traditional brick and mortar setting might be able to take away from the model that you present, isn't it? To allow them to maybe meet the educational needs of students when they particularly had difficulties in hiring the right quality or the right types of staff. So that's a really useful thing to know. But if you were a parent and you were looking at sort of a hybrid or completely online school, what kind of questions is really important for them to ask before they enroll their child?
So we love that. We love giving people, whether that's a parent or a partner, the questions that they should be asking, even if they haven't thought of them yet, because we have over 5 years of experience in designing this way. And we never say our way is the way. It is the way we do things, and it's right for those that are considering this pathway to make sure that it feels right to them. So connections, is I think keeping the young person as the center point here is, how can you ensure that the online school partner or the hybrid partner or that school of choice is going to be able to help that young person build meaningful connections? Because if without connections, we don't feel engaged, and without feeling that we have the confidence and the engagement. So it's a kind of self-repeating prophecy. How can that young person feel seen? How can that young person feel heard? And who are the staff that are going to make those things happen? For me, I always come back to the why, which is young people. So regardless of that decision pathway, focusing on who are your children in your cohort, who is your child, and putting them front and center of, other things that matter, but should just be non-negotiable, which is, I have a child in year 5. What are your GCSE results? Those things matter, but they should just be there anyway. So start with the young person first and center, and you're already on to winning. Then unpacking, I think, more around this quality piece. How much contact time, and in what subjects, and how many times a day. What does that day structure look like? Because it is a balance. There is a tipping point when we've spent too far of time online before you're just wasting time, right? So looking at these things that matter. If you were to go into a physical independent school, what would you be asking yourself? You would be asking, who are your teachers and what are their subject expertise? Are they, experts that have been in the digital realms or very passionate about them? So being not afraid to meet some of the team is really important. How many children are learning at one time and in which groups? Because that comes back to that personalization. What subjects are being taught? Are you having daily lessons in the core? Because if not, then there's only another outcome, which is either they don't have them at all or it's much more asynchronous. And, I have a 16-year-old myself, but she still needs, that kind of contact time and that teacher directed time. And we'll go back to that report. So for me, it always is a center point of, what is the impact going to be on the young people? Who are the young people in my community? What are the cultures and values that are really important to us, either as individuals or as schools? And how can we find the right partner that can help us deliver on this mandate? And then the second piece always comes back to those quality, and that rigor. Because if those pieces are in place, the young people do want to show up. They are engaged. They do make progress. And families do have time, and schools do have time to focus on the other things that are mattering back in their physical communities.
And do you feel that the role of the teacher might evolve, like needing maybe different skills than perhaps that they have in a traditional classroom?
Yeah, I think this is a big piece that we've been working on, and it's such a pleasure. Also, you may or may not know, or the listeners may not know, but the University of Derby is really pioneering this. In September, they will launch the first DFE-approved PGCE for online teaching practitioners. And there is a major shift because we move from being conduits or content deliverers, which we often see in the physical sense, to actually being facilitators of learning outcomes online. If you're only speaking at young people online and there's not a lot of doing, the focus just isn't there. So then there's a pressure to then catch up or do things outside of the live lesson. So we focus much more on a pedagogy rooted in obviously understanding who the young people are and where their individual pathways are. So looking at the people, and then how do we facilitate great learning outcomes? And that's really where the use of pedagogy comes in. So what tools are you using? What topics and themes, so that it's got purpose and it has meaning, right? And they have a huge amount of fun. Actually, the greatest sense is a little bit like the Holy Grail when you move to facilitation, is your teachers work less, they plan more, but actually in the live lesson, they're working less because the engagement levels of students are so much higher. So you can get really great outcomes and assessment of learning in live lessons, which then can filter out for assessment for learning, in terms of the work that happens when those Google Meets shut off.
Now, obviously, you've been within this area for some time now, and you've navigated lots of ups and downs. So if you were going to give one piece of really good quality advice to educators or school leaders who are themselves starting to navigate this digital shift, what would you say would be pivotal?
I think the first is start. There's always be yeah, but and reservations. I think first try to start with an open mind. and go on a journey of discovery and exploration. Spend time, because there are some fantastic other providers out there who do it in their own unique way. So spend some time, looking at the different options, asking these questions, and really finding what will fit most for that unique school's community, culture, value sense. And I think also it's, people like Sophia High School, we do a lot, and increasingly so, of short-term plug-in gaps. So where schools would like to extend and enrich their GCSE options or A-level options, but they don't have the budget or the reach in which to do so. Or they have a shortage in a teacher subject specialist area. But short-term is very easy. And what I think also is see this as a marathon, see it as the first step towards schools building the confidence, the understanding, that design methodology kind of loop, that this should be the start of a journey, even if using someone like Sophia to plug an immediate gap, but that you're on a pathway to developing, your own hybrid workforce that works for you, works for your school, works for your school community. And I think that's what we get so excited by, is to work as colleagues, with our bricks and mortar partners in terms of getting them on that journey. And I have to say, it's a little bit like, I would imagine what it's like when you rehabilitate, a bird, and you get them to a point where you're ready to let them fly. And I think that is one of the most beautiful things, is to see schools. We might show them 1,000 things, but they take away the 100 that really matter and really work for them. And then to see how that then is brought to life, which I think is really quite special, because no school is the same. And I think that is something that is really important to keep in mind. Keep an open mind and see it as a roadmap. We can help you on that first step, and then we'll give you the confidence that you need to fly, but don't be prepared to take that leap, because we've seen it from the other side of what is so incredible and what is possible when you embrace this kind of new way of working.
And you're absolutely right. Every school is individual and not the same path. Just like with students, it's not going to be the same path for all of them, is it? And you and your team at Sophia High have really been trailblazing within this area. So what's next for you? What do you see evolving within Sophia High as you move forward over the next few years?
Yeah, so we really see it as an awesome responsibility, if I could explain it like that, to be the kind of team that is out there testing and trialing and sharing that information. And we don't always get it right. And sometimes it's not because of anything we've done, but because the technology is not right. So, we see that as being able to champion and then be able to share real life experience in real life classes. As I said, the best thing that we do is we invite, our colleagues in to see things in real time, because they go away and they think, wow, that's possible. For us, I think the thing that we're working on at the moment is really, again, embracing this age of intellect that we seem to be in. We've just released something that's been happening behind the scenes, which is our Wisdom Knot. So looking at all the different threads of different types of intellect that we think young people are going to need. We have been navigating the world of AI from as young as 4 years old, with human barriers all the way through. But again, putting these things in play in order to make sure that these young people that we are honored to work with, and their families and our school partners, have the right toolkit to then go out and lead the future. And we see that as just giving them keys to unlock as many doors as possible. So, again, keeping those quality aspects high as we see new tools and technologies, really freely sharing, our team's center of excellence, so that we can inspire like a ripple effect. What we might then inspire back in traditional classrooms. But I think, again, going above and beyond, we have a real sense of what we've cultivated over the last 5 years, and the quality metrics that sit behind that, whether it's accreditation or it's results. And now it's a case of those being the kind of non-negotiable bottom threshold, and accelerating that to looking at even more infinite possibilities. But again, keeping in mind how we also not just do this and keep it for ourselves, but how we can share that, and it's one of the things I love about being part of the ISA community is to have a captivating audience sometimes, who we can share, as collaborators. And I think that's really, really important for the sector.
Melissa, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. You've really helped us explore this topic in great depth, and I really appreciate your openness and expertise. It's been great having you as a guest.
Absolutely wonderful. And you've heard me say this before, but any of the ISA community that would love to come in and just kind of take that fly on a wall tour. You know, we run them every week, and it's actually one of the highlights, because the more that we can bring people in to see what's possible, the more that we'll see that in play, you know, back for our teacher workforce, you know, for our schools, but actually more importantly for the children themselves.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure.
And to our audience, thank you again for tuning into this episode of this ISA podcast series focusing on AI and technology in schools. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribed for past and future episodes where we'll continue exploring crucial topics in education. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll be back soon with more insights and inspiration. Until next time.
You've been listening to Independently Speaking, the podcast of the Independent Schools Association. For more information about ISA and the schools we support, please visit isaschools.org.uk.